Great. Hi, everyone. It looks like everyone has joined the audio from what I can see. So I'm John Garside. I'm the training officer for Mountain Training England and for the BMC. So thanks very much for joining us today for Paul's presentation on teaching skills. And it's obviously important sort of core session for our conference because it's the centre of what you all do, delivering our skills courses and our leadership qualifications. And as sort of outlined in the summary that Paul sort of provided describing this session, you know, much, if not all of what we do is essentially about taking candidates and participants from maybe sort of being sort of dependent upon others to sort of being independent walkers themselves and climbers themselves and independent leaders of others and climbing instructors. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Paul and he can sort of obviously lead this session. He will be leading this session. There'll be chances for questions. There's going to be breakout rooms. So I'll sort of hand it to Paul. So thank you very much, Paul. Over to you.
Good. Well, it's morning, I suppose. So good morning, everyone. Couple of little things, just as a bit of a reminder that the session today is being recorded. Most of you have already I can already see have got your full names up on your images. If you haven't, could you just make sure you change that? It just means that Kath can keep an eye on who's here for the records and etc. Usual sort of thing. I'm pleased to see most people have got their microphones muted already. If you've got a question, either put it in the chat box and I'll try and monitor that as we go along, or Kath will give me a little nod if there's something that she thinks is there that we might want to deal with there and then. Or just use the raise your hand symbol and hopefully that should get my attention. I'm going to try to make it as interactive as I possibly can. I know this isn't the same as doing it if we're stood up in front of you like it was originally planned. So yeah, so those are just those things to consider. Okay, so first little bit then. So it's probably worth just introducing myself. So I'm Paul. I basically have been working on mountain training courses since about 2002, and I deliver the spectrum of mountain training awards, basically from indoor climbing assistant through to rock climbing development instructor, foundation and development coach, but then also the walking schemes I'm involved with Lowland, Hill and Moorland, and then not course director, I work on ML courses as well. So I've got that sort of side of things. My other side of it was I was a teacher for 13 years and involved in educating teachers as well. So that's a bit for me. First bit, to see how much you lot are awake. If you should be able to go towards the top of the screen bit and find a function that says annotate. Everybody found that? Yeah. Just either do a little squiggle on the page for me, or a little star or a symbol or whatever it is. We're going to use those a little bit just to start with to check you're awake, and I might use them at various other points during the session as well. So to keep you going. Excellent. I see this is why none of us are artists. Cool. Right, wonderful. If I could get you to stop now, that'll be ace, because this will keep going for a while otherwise. And I'm just going to clear all those drawings off. And what we'll just do is we'll nip to the next slide. So can you just put a little star where you're based in the country, just so we can have a little look and see where everyone is. Cool. Okay, so I think it appears that everyone stopped. As you can see from there, there's quite a nice little spread for where we are around the country. There's definitely a few people that have sneaked in outside Mountain Training England and Mountain Training Wales borders, which is nice to see. So that's that first part. Brilliant, thank you. And then the next little bit is I'm just interested in which awards you predominantly run. So which is the walking award that you predominantly do? or predominantly work on? Cool. Okay, thank you, everyone. So that's useful for me, because what it means is hopefully I might be able to tailor some of the information that I'm going to put on relevant to different people and different levels, because I know not everyone's delivering the same thing, and obviously not everyone's working at the same level, same awards. So it's again a useful sort of thing for me. Cool. So are you familiar with the mountain training ethos? It's something that was put in a good few years ago now, but 3 of the bullet points are actually really important for us from a teaching and learning perspective. That first one, that developing independent walkers. Good leadership is more than just decision making, technical skill. It's about supporting and developing others, and then inspiring people as well. They're all really relevant parts to us when we're looking at teaching and learning as a general concept. The key bit that underlies anything to do with that is decision making. Now, there was a little tiny bit of homework. I'm pleased to say the majority of people at least looked at the homework, not necessarily completed the homework. Oh well, these are one of those things, but it's not a major problem. What it does was it fed into a little task that you guys are going to do in a few moments in breakout rooms. But basically, one of the components that we need to manage, or a bunch of the components that we need to manage when we're doing or considering teaching and learning full stop, is one of these 4 broad areas that are on your screen now. You've got the physical locations you're using. There's some advantages, and disadvantages of using different locations, but then there's also some pros and cons in using different places depending on the environmental conditions. The physical location stuff is stuff that only changes over geological timeframes, whereas the environmental stuff is the stuff that can change from minute to minute concept, maybe slightly longer time frame, season to season. The participants, obviously, we know that we work with different types of participants, and we're also preparing people to go and work with different groups of people. They may not match the same groups of participants that your experience is in, which is quite interesting with how we have to start thinking. And now underpinning all of that is you, the coach, the instructor, the leader, whichever title you want to give yourself, you underpin that process. So this triangle folds up to create a net. Now, what we've got here is a group of students on a Lowland Leader training course. This is a group for Manchester High School for girls. And what you can see there is they are writing on those things, thinking about all the consideration points were some of the things that we're asked to do in that little SurveyMonkey task that you guys got sent. Now, this is what they have come up with as they were thinking about it and discussing those particular points. So the things to consider are that different people, as we develop, will have different decision-making functions come in, from basically making a right route choice through to the decisions about how we're going to teach somebody or how they're going to learn for that particular day. Now, that changes as your skill level changes. So what we have here is just a little series of triangles similar to what we had before. This one on the left-hand side, as you're looking at it, the smaller based triangle, that's somebody with minimum amount of experience. They've got a very, very narrow base, whereas the middle one's a little bit broader and the final one's a bit more broader. The idea is a bit like the the comfort, stretch, dangerous type model that we often use with working with people in sort of development type situations. The same thing happens to us as leaders or instructors or coaches. And so what we've got is the same activity having been done with a range of people. I've purposely blurred them, so don't worry about trying to read them too carefully. But what we've got is on the one side, can you see how there's a minimum of writing on it? Yeah. with a bit more in the middle and a bit more on the end. Yeah, and it's increasing. Yeah, I can see a few little nods, so that's useful for me. What we've actually got here, this is for some whitewater leaders, and advanced whitewater leaders at that, actually working in the Alps. And this was a group, the ones without anything or very little on were a group of people that actually just, they didn't know it at the time, but they had failed their advanced whitewater kayak leader. And when you looked at their logbooks, for instance, and asked them questions, they had such a narrow base of understanding of what they were doing, they couldn't work out what they actually had to make decisions on. Whereas the guys at the right-hand side were the assessors, the 3 assessors that were working on that particular course. There are some themes that go all the way through that. Yeah, so when I was having a look at your bits of homework, again, there were themes going through, and in a second we're going to share something with you that I've pulled out from those themes that you've come up with. Now, what we're doing in all time of this, as that leader, that coach, that instructor, is we're having to balance, based on our own personal knowledge and experience, what the clients want and what they actually need, combined with the locations that we've got available to us and the environmental conditions that we've got on that day, to create the most ideal learning experience that we can. If we choose the wrong location, what would potentially happen? Any ideas? Pop an answer in the chat box. So we've got two things, couple more. Cool. Less positive learning experience, definitely, Mark. Disaster, yeah, Andy, agree. Cool. Any more? Confusion, yeah, Robert. That's a good one, definitely, especially when we're teaching people. Cool. Brilliant. Okay, good. Thank you for that. Thank you for those contributions. And I quite like that last one from you there, Stu, about lack of opportunity to teach in context. That is actually something that we see a lot, and I've seen a lot over recent years of observing people delivering teaching of navigation in particular, about how they teach a skill but they don't teach it in context, so therefore the learner gets confused and they go away and don't have the right tools to be able to do what it is we actually want them to do. That could be going to lead other people, but it could actually just be happening between training and assessment. So when they turn up to assessment, they've got the wrong message, or they haven't understood it as fully as perhaps they could do in the past or have done. The other example to do with that is how many of you have had people turn up at a lowland, hill and moorland ML assessment situation, and it's a clear blue sky, you can see for miles, and the first thing they do is they get the compass out, they take a bearing and they head off in a straight line. Yeah, that for me says a couple of things. One of those things could potentially be that they've just gone away and practiced that particular skill and have learned that that is one way and they generally get the answer right. But the other side of it is potentially from our point of view of teaching and working with our clients, that we've put too much emphasis on one particular part of navigation by doing lots and lots of small micro nav legs that require them to do lots of walking in straight lines on compass bearings. So then they've come away with the wrong message of what they actually do when they navigate. Yeah, I saw a few nods. I've only got a few people I can see today, so thank you for those people that I can see. I won't name you, but I'm definitely seeing some nodding, so that's always good. Cool. Bren, if you go to on the annotation, there should be a little cross, and you can just click on the cross and it will stop that from happening for you. Excellent. Cool. So we've already said that if we choose the wrong location, learning won't happen. If we choose the wrong environment or wrong environment conditions, will have an impact on learning as well. So the example I can talk about from a climbing point of view is teaching somebody to tie in. It might be better for us to sit and teach somebody to tie in while we're sat in the bunkhouse, in the minibus, before we've gone to the venue, because then they can concentrate on that skill. That teaching them to tie in on the abseils point for Castle Helen is probably the wrong place, because they are going to be completely and utterly focused in on the fact that they're nearly 100 meters above the sea, and what we're going to go down there in a minute, and they're already thinking about other elements. Okay, so what we're going to do is, in just 1 second, there's a little Survey Monkey link there. We're going to split you into breakout rooms. I'm going to shove that Survey Monkey link. Either you can copy it straight off the slide itself, if that's possible, or if not, I will put it into the chat box in a moment. And what we're going to get you to do is we're going to get you to split into little groups, little tiny groups of 3, basically. And there are 4 questions within that. This is the complicated bit, because I don't know who's going into which group, but basically if you're in group 1 or 2, you're going to do question 1. If you're in 3 or 4, you're going to do question 2. 5 and 6, question 3. 7 and 8, yeah, question 4. And then I'll let the last 2 groups, 9 and 10, to decide which question they want to do themselves. And what it is for each of those areas that we've just put up, it in terms of the client, the participants or clients, you, the leader or the coach, the location and the environment, what we've got is a series of things that possibly need sorting into some sort of order, more important over less important. Does that make sense to people? Cool. So what we're going to do is we'll split you into, where have they gone? Breakout rooms. Where's it gone?
Well, I've got them here.
Oh, you've got them here. Thank you.
Okay. Right, in you go.
Excellent. Have we got everyone back? Possibly. Think so. It looks like it. So that's
Back
good.
from the dark side.
How did you find that task? Easy? Not so hard?
Very hard, because all of them with different candidates could be equally important, but there you go.
Cool.
Yeah, it's not
Agrees,
easy.
he says tricky.
And funnily enough, that's the answer. Because it is purely based on that situational awareness of what you're actually going into and doing. So, you know, where Stuart mentioned early on in the chat box something about teaching in context. If we don't do things in context, we don't know what it is we actually need to make a decision on in time at certain times. So if you've never navigated in fog or in dark conditions, then when you go and do it for the first time on an assessment, which I have had happen on things like a lowland leader assessment, for instance, where they then try and use some tools that they've been given, but because they're not practiced, or potentially those tools weren't done in context, they then struggle. Yeah. So that's an interesting point. Does anybody want to, from each of the groups, want to have a little, just mention what they were talking about and what sort of things came up in their conversations?
So Paul, I was with Greg and Colin, so we were looking at the question number 4.
Yeah.
So we sort of put them into pairs initially, but as you said, the whole thing is, as like most things, it just depends.
Yeah.
So we've got our competency, and then the knowledge of the location, knowledge of the group and aims of the group. And then we've clumped mental state along with our fitness, fatigue and confidence and attitude to risk in the same sort of box, really, because all those things are going to be linked. And that then leads to your safety net, because that's an interesting phrase, isn't it? So that generated some discussion. And then below that, we put the other things into the day, which were the points of interest and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But very difficult to sort of analyze the decision process from so for instance, Greg was discussing, how do you assess the knowledge of a group without having met the group? For instance, that's an example.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I've just shared there is the answers that the guys were looking at that question. Bizarrely, it gives a bigger bar to the least important thing. So it's the exact opposite of the way around you're talking. But yeah, this one here, that knowledge of group, for instance, we talked about this when we put together the remote supervision guidance notes of actually, you're going to do something different if you don't know what the group are going to do compared to if you've already got a working relationship with that group. So for instance, it could be from back in my days of running Gold DAV with my students from my school, that I know exactly what journey they've been on. I know exactly what journey they've trained in and what they've done and what terrains they've gone in. So funny enough, we've gone and done some pretty exciting stuff for their assessments, or we've allowed them to get into that environment and that situation. Whereas if I've then now working for myself get asked to come in to come and do a Gold DAV assessment for you, or to supervise a group for you, Sam, I'm going to go, oh, I don't know the group, and so I'm going to potentially operate in a very different way because of that situation. Cool. Thank you for that, Sam. Anyone else want to go in from the same sort of question?
I think, Paul, that was the discussion between the three of us. That was the sort of agreed list of the 10.
Yeah.
So, yeah, is that okay?
Cool. Did anyone else do that question, or was it just Sam's group?
We looked at the client one. Is it the
client
client one
one
we're talking about?
So the client one was, let me get to the right one. Up here, no, that's location, client, there we go.
Yeah, we kind of aims and goals we put first. We didn't actually get finished because, to be honest, once you've got their aims of goals, then it's all such a movable feast, which is what the other gentleman was saying.
Yeah.
That really, even though with one group you might put, okay, their ability, their mental health high up there because it's not very good.
Yeah.
You know, with another group that might not be important because they're capable and interested. You might put their motivation at the top. If they're not motivated, that's going to have a massive effect on what you can do. So really, we decide. Well, certainly my thinking from that was once you know what they want to do and how many you've got, the rest will just move around depending on the group.
Oh, so depending on the situation, you're saying, Chris?
Depending on where you go. Well, once you've decided where you're going, and once you get to know the group, all those things will move around and affect your decision making as you are going up the hill or to the crag or whatever.
Yeah. Anybody else? Another group got views from that one?
Yeah. Can I come in there?
Yeah. Who's that? Is that Terry?
Terry. Yeah.
Yeah. Go on, Terry.
My group, which was Michael and Alison, we had the one with respect to the environment.
Okay.
And we felt, that a lot of the questions in it were actually interlinked.
Cool.
You know, the actual weather, underfoot conditions, seasonal vegetation. It's difficult in a way to actually try and differentiate between them because one had a knock-on effect on the others.
Good.
So, yeah, we came up with the answers, but we felt some of them could have had equal status rather than 1 to 10.
Yeah, I do agree with you there, Terry, because there's actually, when we've done this in real life with people and we've got them to sort of move cards around, for instance, we've not ended up with a linear progression. We've ended up with 1 or 2 key points and then some others that were all on equal footing.
Yeah.
Sadly, I couldn't find a piece of software that would allow me to do that with you guys in that way, but I do take your point. The interesting one for me, certainly when we start thinking about moving into winter conditions, is that what's the previous weather been for the last 4 weeks with regards to the snow? What's the actual weather currently doing and what the forecast is doing is all going to have a massive effect on our decision making. And we sort of know that from this sort of the Be Avalanche Aware type campaign. Likewise, for any of you that are cavers, yeah, that what's been going on the previous few days or what's going on upstream of you is going to have a decision on going into a caving environment potentially as well. Yeah, so it might not be raining where you are, but it's going to have an effect further upstream.
Yeah, we did talk about that with not winter conditions necessarily, but volume of rain affecting streams and water.
Yeah.
We did touch on winter with snow conditions and things, but yes, actual weather, previous weather, and forecast of weather. Thank you.
No problem, thank you. Anne, I think you were trying to go next.
Yeah, we did the question 1 and as well, and we had I suppose a little bit of kind of a different opinion in that we kind of put experience first, because that's kind of they might have a goal that they want to lead, but if they've never climbed before, then that goal's not realistic. So underpinning everything has to be the person's experience, and their ability and knowledge has to be able to do that. And the others we juggled with those, but yeah, we put experience, ability, knowledge, and then the others we toyed with. And if someone had special health conditions, that would be more important. And but yeah, goals were important as well for us. The client's goals, that was kind of pretty much after that.
Yeah. What's really interesting with this, certainly this one with the clients, is there's no one thing that's more prominent than anything else on the whole. You know, you've got their client's altitude to risk being quite up there. Everything else is quite evenly weighted, isn't it? Which then links back to what Terry was saying about some of the environmental things being so closely related that they're almost the same thing. Any other observations or points from people? No? Okay, well in that case we'll move on to the next little bit. So just swap screens around again. Okay, so can you see the girls with the triangles again? Is that what you've got? Cool. Okay, so the way that I've been doing this is, when it comes to a learning experience, and that could just be planning a journey, so you're going to go and see something along the journey, or that could be actually planning a teaching experience. So that could be when we're working with expedition skills modules and thinking about how to teach navigation, for instance, or working with climb instructors and thinking about, you know, where is the best place to go and teach this particular group of clients to lead, for instance. I start the course with this, because then as we go through the day or through the couple of days of the course, etc., we can then go back and we can add in a different color if we wish to. We can add in a new decision-making factor that we might not have considered before. So we're helping bridge that decision-making understanding, or that gap from that novice and where they're already starting through to bringing it on to more of what we do. Yeah, cool. Okay, so it allows us as a bit of a reflection tool. It also is used as a trigger for helping me talk about why I'm making certain decisions on that day. So the trainee instructors, the trainee leaders can start coming up with, oh, so that's the reason X is happening, or that's the reason Y is happening. So, or the reason why we've gone to place Z. So for instance, it might be the prevailing wind is southwesterly, it's relatively strong, but the Peak District's been wet all week and I'm trying to climb. So I'm going to probably go to somewhere like Burbage North because I know it's going to catch the wind, but I'm also going to go and try and find somewhere up near Ash Tree Wall where there's at least a big boulder for us to hide behind when we're not climbing, so we're not being completely blasted by the weather. So we can create that more stable learning environment. When you look at your novice instructors trying to do that, they'll be runging around at the other part of Burbage North or other parts of Burbage North that are completely exposed, because they haven't taken into account the fact that they actually do need somewhere to hide as well. So they'll all be wearing their biggest down jackets and waterproofs and all the rest of the bits and pieces, but we can still manipulate what we're doing slightly to choose a better learning environment. Yeah? Okay, cool. So the next part then to consider is, how do we actually teach decision making to these people? Have a little think. We're very good at teaching technical hard skills, but we're not so good necessarily at helping them understand what their decision making is. With that thought in mind, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you back into some breakout rooms again for 10 minutes again. But this time what I'd like you to do is just when you come back into here, just one of your group in the chat box, just write a couple of sentences about what you could do or what you do for helping people make better decisions. Do people understand what I'd like you to do? Got a couple of nods, thumbs up, brilliant. So in that case, let me find the screen. Oh no.
Paul, I've got them ready.
You've got them ready. Oh, thank you. So once you start coming in back in, guys, just make a few little notes in the chat box for us about what your general discussions were, because that will allow people to just have a quick little look at that whilst they pop in. Also means I save my voice. I quite like this one that Kat's just put in, actually, about that verbalizing what you may have done or what you might have done otherwise. That's something that if you have a look in any sort of academic papers, they're talking about cognitive apprenticeships is the big words for basically just saying, explaining what you're doing or explaining what you could have done. Cool, fun. And we've got make the most of every chance you get to people discuss why they made decisions. Yeah, so it's not just, it's often in that whole reviewing element, it's what have you just done there? What could you have done differently? What may have triggered you to think differently or to do things in a different way? Is a useful framework for trying to then get people to trying to get them to think about what they might do the next time they're in that same situation. Whereas if they did the same thing next time, it may be the right situation there, it may not be. Cool. Question rationale from Chris, which is probe as appropriate. Sam, what's this storytelling? Do you want to pop up onto the microphone and have a little mention of that for us?
Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Yes, you can. Yeah. Cheers, Sam.
We were just saying that quite often we can use either our own stories, or we can give examples from other areas of adventure, or indeed from life examples, to make the picture rich for them. So you can explain where things have gone really well, possibly where things have gone not so well, and then just maybe signpost them towards. Greg was discussing, he'd done a training course with Irata where they went through a video and they paused it on particular points where the decision at that point led to the next decision, to the next decision. So they're using examples from the outdoors and other industries to highlight good decision or poor decision making process.
Yeah, there's some really nice, I know it's going back to winter, but there's actually some really nice winter case studies that do a similar sort of thing. They're mainly from the American side of things, but yeah, there's loads of like little animated stories that you can change and sort of stop at certain points and say what the decisions were and a few little elements. I don't know, Stu, Lade, do you happen to have a link or know any of those off the top of your head? I can't remember one thinking about it now. what I'm going to do then is we'll move forward a little bit with this. So back to the presentation, and what we've got is some of the discussions that I overheard people having when I had a little chat to them, but also was starting to come up with there was about how we need to vary what we do depending on the situation to help people with their own decision making. We quite like labels. Well, I don't know if we like labels, but people are quite keen to tell you whether they're a mountain guide or whether they're a mountaineering instructor or a climbing instructor or whatever the title is. So we must like titles to a certain extent. And I've put a couple of titles up there. For me, those titles tend to fit slightly with this concept of moving people from being dependent to being independent. And that, for me, is when someone is dependent, how many decisions are they actually making for themselves? It's not many often, is it? Their decision making might have ended by booking that member of the mountain training community to take them out for a climb or to take them up a mountain. And that was the real end of their decision making. Whereas at the other end, we've got people who are independent, a bit like what all of us are, about, right, we're going to go do X and we want to do Y. And it comes down to the fact that we're making the decisions. So over the course of a training course, we can take somebody from being very dependent at the start of the course and hopefully starting to move them towards independence by the end of that course. For something like an ML training course, we've got 6 days to do that. So it's not a short amount of time. Something like a lowland leader, on the other hand, where we've got 2 days, it can be quite tricky to do that. So we've got to think about then how we're delivering our course to enable that to potentially happen. Make sense? Yeah, excellent. So, you know, an example I might give in this context might be I've booked somebody to go and climb a mountain in the Alps. I'm not an alpinist. I've never climbed a big alpine peak, and my decision making ended when I booked my mountain guide to take me up the hill. That mountain guide, not all of them are like this, but that mountain guide was particularly French and was like, come here, stop there, come here, stop there, come here, stop there, wait, come here. And he did that to me all the way up and all the way down the mountain. I had an experience, but it might not necessarily have got me to that point of either starting to become an independent alpinist, and I might have actually had quite a shocking time because my motivation might have dropped by that happening as well. See, there's a little chat come through. Hopefully there's no guides on here that have taken offense to that. Whereas at the other end, we're in much more of a mentoring relationship, and that might be something that when we're working with peers or somebody who's working through the awards, once they stop getting to that dependency on us, they start to go, oh, I'm thinking of going to X today with this group of clients, and they're just after a little bit of reassurance from you at a professional level or even just a friendly level of going, oh, what's the weather doing today? You know, I think the weather's doing this. I think this would be a good venue choice. And that might be from you guys as experienced individuals that turn around and go, yeah, cracking choice. Or had you thought of venue Y? We're in a sliding scale through that potentially when we're out actually working for real. So example could be a winter's day in Scotland, particularly grim forecast. And we've had a really nice, pleasant day so far. It's been really sort of quite coachy, instructory. It's a bit of like, well, where do you think we should go now? What do you think we should do here? Until we hit the ridge line that has now got the wind blowing really strongly, gale force across it. That's the point where I might switch and go, right, we're doing this, guys. And I might switch into that French guide mode and go, right, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're going here. And once we've had that brief moment, we could actually then go, right, now let's settle down. Why did I make those decisions? We could actually review that and then give them back that responsibility again. Can anyone think of opportunities where you've done things like that in the past yourselves?
Sometimes when you're
go Go on, Chris.
This is Chris, by the way. Teaching lead climbing, you may often give them the opportunity to choose a route that they want to lead.
Yeah.
But then when they pick some completely unprotected horror show, you will go, no, you're not doing that.
Yeah.
And explain, you know, you're definitely not doing that, but then explain why you're not letting them do that, because they possibly haven't picked up on the fact that there's no runners in the entire route.
Yeah, they've picked it because it's a 6 meter severe that they want to do to tick to get to their RCI, for instance, but have failed to realise it's actually just an extended boulder problem because they haven't looked at it, for instance. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, a couple of people started to touch on this when you were having your discussions in your groups last about how we actually learn. Yeah. How do we learn? Well, the key bit for me is it depends on what we're learning. So this is the point where you can use your annotate element again. So what I'd like you to do is on the screen now, you can either, if you click on the text function, it should allow you to write something there for me, okay? And what I'd like you to write is I would like you to write the year of the Battle of Hastings. Yeah, chat function or the annotate function, I don't mind which. Nice, Andy. It's got the same drawing skills as me there. Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to clear that off. So what we've got, a few more extras, excellent. Okay, so what we've got there is what we can refer to as declarative knowledge. It's something that we can actually, ignore the bottom bit for a second, but declarative knowledge is something that we could potentially just state. So for instance, when you potentially learnt your times tables at school, you learnt them by rote, you could tell me straight away that 4 times 5 is 20. But if I actually gave you a bit of algebra that was n times m, you wouldn't understand that it's potentially the same thing. And so people then struggle with coming up with what the answer is at the end. There are a few rules to algebra, so we'll ignore that completely. But can you see how we can state something? How much is stated knowledge for us in the outdoors a lot of the time? What are you thinking? Stated knowledge, useful, not useful?
Can be dangerous.
Can be dangerous. Yeah, it can be pretty dangerous. It's you can have a look on UKC and you can see lots of declarative knowledge being put on there, can't you, on a day-by-day basis, that you're worrying where that information has potentially come from. Okay, so from our side of things, we're potentially looking at something like procedural knowledge, which is the processes. It's the physically doing something. That could be turning the bezel on a compass, that could be walking on a bearing, that could be anything along those lines. That could be building a belay. We can learn in a classroom declaratively how to turn the bezel on a compass, but it doesn't mean we're actually then going to end up using it in the context that we necessarily want to use it. So there's going to be an element where there is some declarative, but there is also procedural in there as well. So declarative tends to be rationales, the theory of, the research into, all those sorts of things. Whereas, oh, Anne, thanks for the 1066 there, Anne. Let's clear that off. Okay. Whereas procedural knowledge is often can be split into broad things, so the concepts, the practical approaches to doing things, and it's also potentially the what or how to do something. But then we combine that into potentially some very specific things that might be situational. Now, this stuff at the bottom, the declarative stuff, for us to be coach educators, for us to be instructors, for us to work as what we're doing, we've got to know the procedural stuff, but we've also got to know the declarative stuff of why we're doing that. If you've got somebody who's got the declarative but hasn't got the procedural, getting that point across can be quite hard for somebody. Likewise, the procedural knowledge is actually what we're often looking for with candidates, isn't it? Can they actually just build me a belay? Can they get me from A to B? I'm not really that fussed about the declarative side of the exact reasoning why they've done that to a point. I am for some things. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So ultimately then, how do we learn? Well, if we're doing something that's procedural based, we've got to physically go and do that, and we've got to do that in such a way that it gives them the ability to have a go and also to not get it right in a very controlled way. Kevin, I know when I popped into your chat with Anne, you were chatting about this. Do you want to just give us a few words on what you were chatting about? Maybe.
Which bit were you dropping in on?
It was the bit when you were talking about how you might vary your approach to let things run, but then still manage the safety side of things.
Yeah, okay. Well, between Anne and myself, you know, one of the ways of actually learning was sometimes just taking a situational approach of where you know, people were being allowed to carry through what their decision-making processes are and what they were doing. So within that sort of safety net of, you know, risk managing that sort of situation, is sort of seeing exactly where it goes, and then just taking the learning out of that situation to say, right, okay, what is it that you did? Why did you do what you did? What can we learn from that? And if you were to do that again, would you have done anything sort of slightly differently? So I think it's, you know, we've all done this. We've all let situations sort of run where we just sort of think, how far do we let it run in order to get that learning experience from it? So yeah, that's kind of the sort of the, you know, in broad terms, the discussion that Anne and I were having.
Thank you so much for that, Kevin. Did anybody else have a similar sort of discussion along that point, or started to get down that sort of route as they were doing that? Okay, so the next little bit then is we've got to think about, when we're teaching people and actually teaching people to teach people, is we've got to think about where we actually want to work and how we want to do that. So for instance, the starting point is what can they already do? And the next bit is, well, what can't they do, but they need to be able to do in order to do the thing that they need in context. So for instance, if it's somebody who's wanting to go for a walk down the Severn Way, you know, what are the actual skills that they need in order to be able to do that from a navigational point of view, for instance? There's probably plenty of stuff that we don't need to teach them. Yeah, we might not need to teach them to do a resection. We might not need to worry too much necessarily about contour lines if they're walking along the Severn Way, which hopefully is just going to go gently downhill. Yeah, but we might want to put in some other things, some of the observational side of things about, well, how do you know how far along the Severn Way have you gone? What can you use to do that? So we might develop some observational skills of, well, this is what a boundary line looks like on a map. We've got to walk 4 boundaries down before we can get to our next pub. Yeah. We're trying to basically overlap what they can't do and what they can do, and how much we overlap that depends on how much time we've actually got with them. If you've only got a short amount of time, that overlap is always going to be small. So we can either cram in as much as we can and go purely on pure send and tell them how to do it and show them how to do it, but not actually let them have a go at doing it. In which case, how much actual learning is going to come from that session? Okay. So I will show you the next slide. I wasn't going to actually. Here are a lot of navigational type terms. Okay, there's loads. Feel free to take a screenshot of that, and you can have a look at. In fact, do take a screenshot of that, please, because that might be useful to reference to in a second with the next little task. We're on our Severn Way. We're on the walk on the Severn Way. We're going from this pub here around the Island Peninsula, and we're going to come back in on that side there. What skills do we need in order to be able to go and do that walk?
Handrailing.
Handrail, yeah, cool.
Tick off features.
Tick off features, good. I've got keeping the see the river, keep it simple. I like that, Sam. Yeah, as long as the river's on your right hand side, you go in the right direction. Brilliant. The handling the map and appreciating the scale, actually, I do quite like that one, Mark, because yeah, if we don't appreciate that that's actually a kilometre or how long that might take us, that might become a bit of a problem. Oh, the symbols, the pub, man of my own heart there, Mark. Cool, appreciate the distance, good. Okay, so we can keep that skill set quite small, couldn't we? What sort of terrain's this? This is good lowland leader terrain. This is good bronze DV terrain. You know, it's those sort of things. So then we can think very carefully about, actually, if we're training people to train bronze DV groups, actually, which of the bits are the important factors? Funnily enough, I haven't had anyone mention use of a compass yet. Yeah. So we want to think about what it is they actually need. Oh, it depends on recent weather. That's true. Or the tide state there, Terry. Because if the tide's a little bit high and the bore's coming in, it might be slightly different. Okay, so this time then, let's just change the map to this one. We're now on Cadair Idris. Do we need a different skill set? Or do we need the same skill set that we've just done in a lowland environment, but need to add bits to it? Add lots. Potentially, yes. Cool. Hire a guide? Potentially. Contour interpretation, brilliant. So if we were taking somebody who was happy walking on the Severn and now taking them to Cadair Idris, and we just went in one foul swoop from one place to the other, are they potentially going to get overwhelmed with their environment? So therefore, potentially it's going to make it trickier for them to understand and potentially practice some of those skills? Cool. I'm getting lots of yeses in the chat box, so that's good. That was the angle I was going for, so that's quite nice. So I'm just going to skip past that next one. So what we're often talking about, cool, depends on the delivery and context, good, is when we're trying to teach people, if we're trying to teach them a harder task, we should normally be trying to keep the environment either the same as what they're used to, or maybe even turn it down slightly. So if we use the context of a climber, they can potentially, you know, they've climbed short slabby routes. Going to take them onto a big multi-pitch route might be a step too far in terms of the environment. And it's potentially going to be a step too far in terms of the tasks that they're thinking about and having to do at that same time. From a navigational point of view, getting somebody to be able to estimate a distance that they've travelled, or to count the number of tick-off features that they've travelled in a simple terrain where there's lots to see and they can very quickly be occupied, thinking about working with teenagers, for instance, may be more beneficial than having to wait 10 minutes while you walk a distance before you see one little tiny feature to try and tick off. So if we're trying to teach them about tick features, how about we go somewhere that's got lots of features for them to tick off so they see the relevance of it? Whereas if you go somewhere where there is one or two really obscure things, for somebody who's just learning to use those tick off features, it's going to be that step too far. Yeah. So what has computer games got to do with teaching navigation? Any ideas? Cool. Okay, so I'm liking some of these answers. We've got, there's maps in loads of first-person games, observation, spatial awareness, big picture, orientating things around. Good. The other one for me is good computer game design actually increases motivation to want to play the computer game. You know, those of you that might have teenagers yourselves, or may quite enjoy playing a computer game yourself, you know when you've got a good computer game, don't you? Or they've got a good computer game because they want to actually keep playing it. And good computer game design basically means that it starts off easy, accessible, and then progressively gets harder whilst varying what you do. So if you think about a classic sort of 1980s, 1990s levels game, a bit like the Mario or whatever it happens to be, where you're going along a level, the first level is you running backwards and forwards and maybe dodging one thing, and you get to the end and you get some success and you get some gold coins and there's a big sparkly noise or whatever it happens to be. The next level introduces the concept of jumping whilst running, and you get to jump over a static thing. And you might have to do a couple of those. The next level, you might have to run and jump further, jump higher, or something might start to move. But all that's changing is they're just changing one little tiny thing at a time. Then you get to an end of level, and you then have to try lots of different things to see what happens to beat that end of level challenge, whatever that may be. Then you get on to the next level, and again it slowly gets more complex, more complex, more complex. You get to the end of the level and you try and do what you did to beat the end of the first level, and it doesn't work. But it's all right because the computer saves you back just slightly before that, so you don't have to go back to the start again. Because if you went back to the start, what's it going to do? It's just going to basically demotivate you. So we can then get people to try stuff. So all that's effectively happening by doing that is they are keeping the environment the same and turning the task up slightly. Once the task's been turned up, they turn the environment up a little bit more and make it a bit more complex, because now you might have little things coming at you, little enemies to dodge, little things dropping onto you. Maybe the bridge falls over if you stand on it for too long, anything along those lines. So this is where something like orienteering maps are absolutely brilliant when it comes to teaching our students to navigate, because we can make it as easy as hard as we want to, because the scale we've selected, it allows us to mean that people don't get bored in between things. And so that then means that we can challenge in a way that actually doesn't matter if we get it wrong, because we haven't got to walk back a kilometre to the point that I last knew where I was to reorientate myself. I've actually only got to walk 200 metres. So just to sort of reiterate that whole task and environment thing, if we're wanting to get people to clarify concepts, we want the environment them to be in to be friendly, predictable. They know what the answer is going to do. If they were, from a kayaking point of view, they know that all that's going to happen if they get this rapid wrong is it's a big pool underneath with a kilometre to the next rapid, so it doesn't really matter if it gets wrong. They already can predict that actually it's going to be relatively safe for them. They then do an easy task and it gets that concept. Okay, brilliant. Now we can make that task harder by maybe catching 2 eddies just above the rapid before going into it, but because the environment's predictable, they're likely to try it. Whereas if I changed where that rapid was and it was a rapid and there's 20 meters of a pool before it runs into another rapid, and we try and do the same thing, what's going to go through people's minds as they're trying those little moves? They're going to do one or two things. They're either going to have a go and accept to swim, or they're going to turn around and go, I'm not doing that. But we do need to move between those areas depending on what we're trying to do. So moving from a predictable environment to an unpredictable environment tends to build competency for what we're doing. So taking somebody from that seven estuary walk, using their skills that they've already got and using them without complicating it anymore on that walk into Cadaridris where we're actually in and we're not getting too excited, that will start to build competence in their understanding of, oh, actually, I was expecting to see X and I was expecting to see Y, and on the left, I'm going to see this track, and on the right, I'm going to see that track. And when I get here, the hill's going to go up. That has then gone, oh, the concept works of me working with my description and what I'm doing. I haven't gone there and gone, here's a new task, here's a new environment, and all of a sudden they're quite confused. Oh, that's a shame. Okay, so we're back to this situational awareness that we spoke about earlier. We often will set little tasks that get people to notice that they might need a new skill. So the example I might give for teaching somebody that might want to use a bearing and compass is I might do it in daylight, but I'll make sure you can't see where we want to go because we've got to go up and over a little hill. Because then it gets them to understand that I potentially use that compass when I want to go in a set direction for a target that I can't see. So then later on that same training course, the light has come down because it's now gone dark. They've made that trigger. Oh, I can't see where I'm going now. What tool shall I use? I'm going to use my compass that we used before, and I'm going to try and walk on a bearing. If they've made that conceptual leap, I'm really happy. I don't care whether they walk off in the wrong direction because they're still not quite practiced in their bearings. But if we make the target big enough, they should hopefully hit it as well if the distance is short enough. Does that work as a concept for you guys? Yeah. So as we're doing this and as we're moving in our decision making, right from those triangles at the start, those first people were talking about the things that they potentially might notice. The people in the middle are starting to understand the things they're making decisions on. And those people that are quite good at it can predict what the outcome's going to be before they even start. So when I'm designing tasks or learning opportunities, first off, it's all about getting people to notice, oh, that's a trigger that I might need to use a different tool. So that's back to what we were talking about before. I might then need to do some actual teaching to help them understand why that's the case or why that's the right tool. But then ultimately, I want them to be getting to that point of being able to predict. So getting somebody to look at a map and tell me what they're likely to see as they walk along a path, a track, a ridge line, that is them telling me what they're expecting to see and what they're predicting to see. And if they're walking along and they are successful in what they're predicting, what's going to happen to their success or their confidence? It's going to go up. What do we want people to be? Yeah, confident. We want them to make decisions and be confident that it's the right decision, and they can only do that if we've given them some sort of framework to work through in order to get that to happen. Okay, so I've done enough talking. It's time for you guys to do a little tiny bit of talking, I'm afraid. This last slide, have a little look at it, take a picture of it, and we're going to put you into some chat rooms again, just into threes. And I would like you to think about all the different ways that you can get from A to B. then I would also like you to think about and why you might make those decisions to go from A to B in what particular way. And what we'll do when we'll come back is I'll get somebody to tell me a way and I'll try and draw it on, so you get to laugh at my drawing and not your drawings this time. And we can then have a quick discussion about why that might be a suitable option and the situation I choose to do that. Everyone understand what we're after? Cool. Okay, so Kath, how are we doing with sending them to rooms? Hey, Michael, you're one of the first back. Do you want to start telling us what you saw or what you decided in your group or chatting about in your group?
Yeah, sorry about that. Didn't find the unmute quick enough.
It's all right, don't worry.
I think we sort of decided that it would probably follow the pony path down.
Yeah.
Until it started to veer away from the boundary, cross the boundary at that point, and then take a bearing to B.
So along where I'm sort of marking now.
Yeah, keep going.
Keep going.
Then you've got a point at which the boundary then departs, or the path and the boundary increases distance.
Yeah.
Then come down, cross to that point, and then take a bearing.
And then take a direct bearing to it. Cool. What were the considerations that mean you might consider doing that?
I think one of them, it sort of all comes down to what your weather conditions were at the time.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's going to be quite wet there, and also you could still be in mist because you're quite high.
Yeah.
So so basically using the boundary as a handrail, and then as you take your bearing, you still got that boundary as a bit of a handrail until you basically got to part company with it.
Cool. Okay. Anybody else decide something different? Thank you for that, Michael.
Yeah, hi, hello.
Oh, Terry.
Yeah, where Christine and I talked about this, where the pony path leaves the sharp drop on the right-hand side, if you then took a bearing either south or whatever to hit the boundary wall or and then when you hit the wall, you know you need to turn right.
Yeah.
To get to the corner of the wall before you then continue with what's just been outlined.
So going that way. And then
no, sorry, continue along the pony path still to the.
Okay.
Well, you could go that way, yes.
So along the pony path.
To follow around, keep going, keep going. Well, that's it.
Keep going
now
until
drop down to the wall, so you
go south.
No.
No. Okay. Sorry.
Where as you follow the handrail around the drop on your right-hand side, where the path leaves, that's it.
Yeah.
At that point, drop south.
Okay.
And then you know you've got to turn right along the wall.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you did the other route, potentially you might, in bad visibility, you might miss the wall to begin with, because if you don't know how far you've gone along the pony path.
Cool. Okay. Brilliant. Any other options? Anyone else? Thank you for that, Terry.
Hi there, Paul.
Go on, Sam.
We came up with an idea of if you had somebody who was wanting to be challenged, is to sort of head from the shelter straight down to the boundary just above the cairns where you got that slight corner.
That one
there.
that's
it. Yeah. And then just to get them to work on their contours and their features and their interpretation is to sort of work almost directly along that line through those rock bluffs.
So
down to that, just down onto that 650 where you got a big rock feature. Yeah. And then from there, we said maybe get them to use a compass to try to hit point B and just see if they mismeasure and hit that spur above it and declare it there.
You've got your assessor head on. I like that, Sam.
Well, but we just thought it would make it far. If you had someone who had good competence, it's just to give that, build that confidence in interpreting that terrain.
Cool.
And show them how things can appear to be the same. But obviously, if you don't put all the things in place, it's easy to trip yourself up.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. Any other options? I see, Greg, you've unmuted yourself.
We were just talking about a way that if you were to treat that fence with kind of diligent suspicion, whether or not it exists, we were talking about going up to kind of where the pony path leads the steep side there above number 1, and then basically straight lining it to B from there. On a bearing, or just going straight down the fall line, one way or the other. Head down that way, and there reaches a, if you've got the benefits of an altimeter or something, it helps even more so. But essentially, you start coming off the fall line if you go wrong.
Cool. Okay. So when I was looking at this, thank you everyone. When I was having a look at this, I was thinking about all the different options I could come up with to go from A to B. And I think I came up with about 4 or 5 in total. But I was thinking in my mind, why would I choose one over another? Yeah, and that's going to depend upon what the weather's doing, what the situation's doing, what the ground's doing underfoot, etc., etc. But the thing is, for us to go and do that journey a couple of times with the clients and experimenting with each of the ones, it's going to be real much of a pain in the bum, isn't it? To then get them to understand what the difference is and why we would consider doing it. So if we're going to think about something like choice, because something like for climbing, for instance, we regularly redo the same moves to get better at it and try and find a more efficient way. Likewise with kayaking, we'll often do the same rapid or the same way and try and get more efficient on it. But doing a big long leg on a mountain like that doesn't allow us to get efficient at the route choice side of things. So where would that take us back? Where would be somewhere better to introduce that as a concept?
Orienteering.
Orienteering, brilliant. Everyone opened up at the same time and all shouted the same thing. Brilliant. Orienteering allows us to do that. The other place that it allows to do that would be a flat plateau as well, wouldn't it, potentially? Yeah, if we wanted to make that step up from orienteering into that more of that flatter environment. Excellent. Okay. What I'm going to do, ladies and gents, is because we've got 5 minutes left, is I'm gonna sort of finish at that point there. I'm sure you might have a couple of questions. I'm happy to stay on for a little tiny bit afterwards if you've got any more questions and you haven't got to rush off to have a quick bite to eat before you're on this afternoon session. Okay, so I don't mind. But yeah, if you've got any questions, feel free to throw them over. We'll either put them in the chat box or open up your mics and do it that way. Well, in that case, as there's no questions forthcoming, you are allowed to escape if you wish. But like you say, if you want to leave, want to stay and have a brief chat about something afterwards, that's fine. Yes, the presentation will be available with some other slides on it that I haven't used.
I just thank you, Paul, on behalf of Mountain Training England and Wales. I found that very interesting. I guess all of us have sat in lots of Zoom meetings and presented things, and this is a very complicated topic. And I think you've done a really great job in trying to keep people involved and using the technology in interesting ways. And and I'd sort of commend you on that, because that's actually sort of walking the walk when it comes to teaching about teaching. So thank you.
Yeah, and it's definitely a lot harder to do it through here than if we'd sat in a room together. Hi, Terry. Got your hand up there.
Sorry about that.
It's all right, Terry, no problem.
That's fine, Paul. Yeah, I think the whole aspect about this is there are so many different ways of approaching things, dependent on the weather conditions being one of the most important, but also the confidence of the group or the individual that you're actually working with or trying to work with. And I think sometimes it can take a little bit of time just to bring the confidence out in people to enable them to actually come up with 1 or 2 ways of doing something rather than an obvious way. But no, I've enjoyed it, so thank you very much indeed.
No problem at all. Thank you to everyone, and thanks for your contributions.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.